Brilliant. So evening, everybody, and welcome to our second edition of our Insight Series webinar. Very happy to see loads of familiar names in the attendee list, which is really great. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, especially because I know some of you are really busy. And for those of you that have just finished school, this is something that you're doing after school. But I promise that this is going to be a really great use of your time, just because we're really lucky to have Steve and Amber here, who both work in medicine, who are going to give us an insight to those careers today. Just to let you know in terms of like how this is going to work, there is a Q&A function at the bottom. That's the one we're going to be using for taking questions. So if you have any questions throughout, please do pop them in there. And then what I will do once Steve and Amber have finished their sections, I will field the questions to them. If you've got any comments, put them in the chat instead. That will be great because we'll be able to see those and we can share those with the other attendees as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to you, Steve, if you would like to share your screen.
It's not COVID, I promise. Right, so sorry, let me do this. Share. Can everyone see that? Yeah, it's full screen. Yeah. Little box. Right. Hi everyone. My name's Steve. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, but the way that our training works means that I currently work in intensive care. So I've been qualified for 5 years, but I'm 35, which means that I must have done something beforehand. So that's why my talk's called Plan B. So I got a B and 2 C's A levels, not the A's and A stars that you were probably, or the equivalent thereof that you were probably used to expecting. So I'm going to talk about the way that I got into medical school and my sort of life up to that point and since, just because it's an alternative option that a lot of people probably 18 don't think about. And I didn't want to do medicine when I was 16. I didn't decide that I wanted to do medicine until I was well into my 20s. So I'm going to go through that. So this is where I grew up when I was about 16. It's not actually like that. It's Bury up north, so just north of Manchester. And like I said, I didn't want to do medicine at all. When I was about 16, I wanted to be a vet, which is what my mum does or did. And so got fairly decent GCSE sort of A's. And at that point, my mother went on a bit of a war against me doing medicine. And it culminated in me, her insisting that I put my finger up a cat's bottom to feel a tumour, which is cancer, without any gloves on. I was like, not for me, really not for me. So I didn't know what I wanted to do then. So I didn't get fantastic A levels, got B and 2 C's, just I couldn't be essentially bothered revising. It's a bit lazy. And so I didn't apply to university when I was 18. I worked in a bar and a camera shop for 6 months, then went around Africa for 6 months, which is fantastic. If you get an opportunity to have a year off at some point, you learn a lot about yourself if you go traveling. I think there are pros and cons of going on your own, but I went on my own. And you learn a lot about yourself. It's a really fantastic experience. So I came back and I thought, well, what can I do with my grades? And I like science. I like people. And I like the idea of going to university to have not a degree at the end of it, but a vocation, so a profession. That I'm maybe a bit autistic. I quite like certainty in things. I like knowing what I'm going to have as my job at the end of it. The idea of going and doing a biology degree kind of scared me. So I ended up, for many reasons, coming to pharmacy. So you've got your normal pharmacist in the street, but also in hospitals. I went to Brighton and I learned how to sail, which has become sort of one of my big passions since. So this is Brighton Pier, one of Brighton Piers before it fell into the sea. It's not really there anymore. So then I worked for 3 years as a hospital pharmacist. So firstly in London, then Taunton. Had a great time, but it just wasn't quite right. I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy putting the labels on boxes bit, but what I did really enjoy was talking to patients, working within a healthcare team, all of the sort of the stuff that basically is the doctoring bit of hospital pharmacy. So it made sense to me at that point to start looking towards medicine. So it probably took me about 18 months of thinking about it. I worked extra, so it's called locuming. So I had my normal hospital job and I worked in a Sainsbury's to earn extra money and saved that up. applied to medical school and got a place. So I started, I think, pretty much on my 28th birthday, actually, or 27th birthday. I can't remember, one or two. So I went and did something called a postgraduate medical degree. So your normal medicine degrees are 5 years. Most people these days intercalate, which is you take a year out in the latter years of that. So you have 1 year to go and do some other degree. Now, I think Amber will probably talk about that because she did that sort of course and I didn't do. But so normal courses last 5 or 6 years for most people. If you want to do a postgraduate one, it's 4 years. You don't learn any less. It's just that you don't have your nice 3-month summer holidays. You have 2 weeks for Christmas and 2 weeks for the summer, and that's it. It's basically a 48-week-a-year course. And we got to do some really cool stuff. I mean, you know, medical school is hard work. You've got to do lots of studying, but there's some really cool experiences as part of that. Another cool experience was I knew at that point that I was quite passionate about emergency medicine and trauma. And so I got, as part of medical school, you have something called an elective. So again, that's in your last 1 or 2 years, you go off and basically you get a free block of 6 to 8 weeks. I think for most people, it's 6 weeks for us. So I went to do it with London Air Ambulance. So got to spend a lot of time at a very big trauma centre at the Royal London down in Bow, and got to spend time with these guys, which was really cool, properly cool. If you're a bit squeamish, just close your eyes for the next, until I say you can open them. Basically, there's a little bit of blood. It's nothing but a bit of blood and a CT scan of something. So this is what I do now. So the first bit of medicine after you're qualified is called your foundation year. So 2 years of rotations. So the toilet is someone I go to see in the middle of the night as a first year doctor who's having a bleed from essentially their bum and was not very well. And then the second one is actually some blood that we pumped out of a machine by accident all over one of our very expensive pieces of kit. But that was for, you know, a very sick patient. And then the scan on the right, so the little white dots that you can see that look like that have got all of these lines coming off them. So this is someone who's taken a shotgun to the chest, and then you'll notice where his hand is. So can you see my mouse on the screen? Yeah, cool. So you'll see here, this is his hand, and then there's nothing here, and that's because shotguns don't do good things to chests. So essentially, don't do drugs, kids. It is bad. So these are the sorts of things, these are the sicker things that I've dealt with. There's lots of writing prescriptions and lots of reviewing patients, but your job in your first couple of years as medical school is essentially learning the basics and helping out on the wards. So that's you know, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, so I focused my rotations on emergency medicine and things that would help me in that sort of career in the future. But you know, I did cardiology, which is hearts, breathing, kidneys, psychiatry, and what else was there? Surgery. You can look back now. So again, like, you know, that it's not all horrible. So you know, the X-rayed teddy bear is because I did lectures to some primary school children and nursery children. So you know, did let us X-ray a teddy for some reason. It was very entertaining for me. Who knew that's what a teddy looked like? And then the top left one with all the people in it, so that's Christmas Day. So, you know, one thing about medicine is that you're going to end up working bank holidays, Christmases, New Year's, your birthday, other people's birthdays, anniversaries, you name it, you're probably going to miss it at some point in your career. So that's Christmas morning a couple of years ago. And then a beautifully drawn portrait of myself on a polystyrene mug by one of our particularly psychiatrically unwell patients, but he was a brilliant artist. I mean, it doesn't really come through in that polystyrene cup, but he was. So I then took another year off. So there are natural gaps in your career as you go through medicine. Where essentially you change jobs. So you've got your first 2 years after you've qualified, your foundation years, and then you reapply for new jobs. And most people then go into another 3-year cycle of jobs. And then after that, you apply for another sort of between 3 and 7 year cycle of jobs before you become a consultant. So every few years there's a gap where you can have a year off and it's not a problem. So I mentioned the sailing, so I always wanted to sail across the Atlantic. So I took a year off to do that because it takes a few weeks. So I spent some time in the Caribbean, did a big hike in the States, did loads more sailing and loads of other cool stuff, and did essentially, I'll go through, money is always important, not important to people, but you want to know what you get paid. So I currently work 50 hours a week, which is basically all the time. and get paid the same as I got paid to work 2 days a week as a locum. And then what am I doing now? So I'm an emergency medicine trainee, so I've got a job. Instead of a natural gap after my second 3 years, I've actually got 6 years worth of jobs all the way through to consultant. And in case you hadn't heard, there's a pandemic on and there's a lot of COVID. So as part of my emergency medicine training, so I've spent time in acute medicine, in emergency medicine, in intensive care, which is where I am now, and I move on to anaesthetics, at least in theory, next month. So this is our unit. These are pictures pulled from the internet that are sort of in public media. I've not taken these of patients. So COVID's been basically most of what I've done, most of the focus of our efforts. Super busy, quite upsetting in a lot of ways. So these are sick patients who are really sick. A lot of patients are essentially not going to survive, but are well enough to talk on FaceTime to their family, and they know that, and their family know that, and we know that. So it's unusual in a way, because a lot of people who are sick as a COVID patient are not awake, and so don't really. It's not as emotional, but yeah, it's been an interesting experience. Yeah, that's us rolling some people. So that's my career through medicine. So I didn't go to medical school until I was 27. I didn't decide to go to medical school or try to get into medical school until I was 26. I thought about it on and off over a long time, but just to think that's an alternative route in if you either don't get into medical school first time around, because I assume you're watching this because you're kind of thinking about it, or if you change your mind, decide not to, and you go and have a career afterwards, there's some definite I'm 10 years older than all of my colleagues that are in my grade of training, but I've had a different life, and I don't regret that in any way, shape, or form. I've really enjoyed it. So I've just worked 2 nights over the weekend. I got up at 3:30 to talk to you guys. So I'm not going to go through a normal day. I'm going to go through what a normal night's like, because that's where I'm going at sort of 8 o'clock. So when you run a night, so get up about 6:30ish at night, and get to work. So, I need to be up at least an hour before handover, and that probably involves driving too fast up the dual carriageway if I get up that late. So handover is where we sit down with the day team who've been looking after the intensive care during the day, and they tell us about all of the patients. Now, if we've been off, or if we've not been in the department for a while, we'll maybe not know any, or only know very few of them. So, imagine getting told we're normally 30 beds, and we're currently up at 90 because of COVID. So imagine sitting down and getting told about 60 patients, say, that you've never met, who are all super sick, super complicated, or potentially very complicated. So find out what their problems are, what the plans are for them, any jobs that they're doing during the course of the night, or, if this happens, do that, or to consider this, or whatever. We then, from 8:30 through to probably midnight, a few of us. So during the day, we've got maybe 9 or 10 doctors. During the night, we've got 2 or 3. Again, it's a bit more because of COVID at the minute, but that's a good rule of thumb. So I'll go around and I'll see my third of those, so 20 patients. So read through the notes, review them, have a look at them, check all of their blood results have been checked and acted upon, check that they're safe, and that any jobs that need doing are done. And through all of this, you're also picking up jobs as you get asked to do it, or as they need doing. Probably from midnight till 2. So someone gets sick, and you do everything you can do, and you realise that they're not doing very well. You get the family in, and what we do is something called withdrawal. So we might decide to accept that they're not going to survive. That happened. On Thursday, I had 8 people die on me. From 2 till 4. So it's carrying on with your jobs. It's doing anything that nursing staff need, whether it's rewriting a drug chart, which is a fairly straightforward process, or whether you've got another sick patient who's deteriorating, or they're asking you quite complicated questions that you might not know the answer to. You need to go and find out the answer. And then, I worked 2 nights, had the day off after my night, and then went and sat a massive Royal College exam, which is an exam I need to be able to progress in my career. So, you've got to revise for those sorts of things. Try and get a bit of a nap, so you hand your bleep over to somebody else and they look after it for one of the other doctors. But then, you quite often will then get woken up, or there's no one else to carry the bleep, and you end up going to a cardiac arrest. And sometimes, one of the downsides of our job is that sometimes relatives and patients can, we're doctors, we're health nurses, we're there to do the best we can do to help people. Sometimes very emotional relatives can get the wrong end of the stick and can be quite unpleasant back at us when nasty things happen. It's because they're upset, but it doesn't make you feel very good when you've we all go to work every day and try our hardest. So that can then upset you if you imagine for the rest of your shift, and it can upset, sometimes upsets people for a lot longer than just one shift. Sort of in the latter part of the night, so in the early morning before the day team come in, you do a whip round and check again that everyone's all right. You know about them. You know that all your information that you're about to pass back to the day team is up to date. Get ready for your handover. Hand over to the day team. Get home. Eat a McDonald's on the way home, which is what I did this morning because I really didn't fancy eating cereal. And try and go back to sleep. And someone will be doing buildings. There'll be a jackhammer on the other side of your wall. It'll be light. There'll be noise. It'll be in the winter too cold, in the summer too hot. Sometimes sleeping during the day is a nightmare, but some people also manage it really, really well. So that's a normal shift possibly. So one thing I was talking about was like what a bad day and what a good day is. So my first day fully qualified. So your first year of being a doctor, you're technically not fully qualified. It starts the day after that. So I had on my first day fully qualified, which was like, crikey, this is big. This is big. I'm responsible now. I'm a grown up, which you're not really. But so I had on my respiratory ward 7 people die on my first Saturday at work. I was like, crikey, maybe this isn't great. But there were people who were very sick and not expected to survive, but still all of that happening in one day. It's not great. And the other thing that gets most people is you make a mistake. So we're all human. We all make mistakes. Most mistakes that happen within healthcare, thankfully, are not significant. They don't really cause anyone any problems. Or someone else, even if they do make it to a patient, the mistake, most of the mistakes actually get picked up by other people. So if you prescribe something that's completely nuts, 10 times the dose of something, usually nurses are fantastic. Nurses usually pick that up. But if the nurse makes a mistake as well and misses it, then something gets to a patient that was never supposed to happen, and that can make you feel really bad because I've essentially spent all of my time from 18 to 35 years old looking after people. That's why I go to work, is to look after people. And if you get that wrong, it can make you feel really bad. Good days. So people don't say thank you as often as you'd think. I think a lot of people think that doctors, they basically watch Scrubs or ER or Grey's Anatomy and think that, we have people lining up to say thank you to us. And it's not really the case. I've got 5 thank you cards in 5 years. I've got 5 thank you cards to me, and 4 of them are for the families of people that died, as an example of people not saying thanks. Other things that you get some break, you get a bit of a social life whilst you're at work. So, we're supposed to get an hour in a 12-hour period. It rarely happens realistically. And then you get to go home on time. So within the emergency department and within intensive care, because it's shift work and there are clear handovers when you hand over to different people, that's easier to manage. But up on the wards, so if you're looking after a respiratory ward or a cardiology ward, it's really, it's not unusual to be at work late. And something you get that back. So usually the rota allows you to take days off. So, or you come into work and there's not much work to do, you get sent home early, but by and by, getting home for 5 o'clock is aspirational. And then, so most of us, like I said, we're busy. I've gone into a room within the emergency department called Resource, where we keep the sickest patients at the start of an 8-hour shift, and I haven't left it until the end of my 8-hour shift. And you've essentially not eaten or drunk in that time, because you just get one sick patient after one sick patient after one sick patient. Money wise, so I will just talk about doing postgraduate, and I'll let Amber talk about sort of allude. I mean, it's also all over the internet. It's really easy to find for undergraduate medicine, so normal entry. So if you go and I stacked up about 50 grand's worth of debt during the course of a 4-year degree. That's not true, because I already had my pharmacy degree and my pharmacy debt underneath that. So I probably stacked up about 35 grand's worth of debt just from medicine, but I added it onto some other debt from my previous degree. Postgraduate medicine is the only course where you are allowed to take out a second set of loans. So you still get, it counts almost as an undergraduate course. So you can have student loans second time round. Medicine is the only one that you can do that for. Like I said, it's 4 years and 48 weeks a year. So it's pretty intense. In terms of entry for postgraduate, so I'm luckily worked hard at pharmacy school. I got a first class pharmacy master's, so it's a 4-year run through course. I had a first class degree, so that was fine for getting in. There are certain universities that will want people to have come from a science background, so I've done a science undergraduate course. And biochemistry is the like classic, where at Warwick, you know, out of 160 people on the course, probably 130 had done biochemistry. But we also had people who'd done politics, philosophy. There's a graphics design student on the current course. You know, so some universities will only let you in with a science degree. Some universities will, if you got a degree, it's a degree and they don't care. Which you know, is probably challenging for you to go from your graphics design degree and do medicine in 4 years. But as a person, you probably bring a whole wealth of a different approach to life that is really important for medicine as a whole. So you start off about 35 grand a year as an F1, so foundation year one doctor. I work 50 hours a week and I get paid 50 grand for it. That's my base salary. So the stuff that I've done this weekend, the 2 night shifts that I've done, will be extra, and you know, you can make significant gains on that income. I don't do it for the money. It's because it's really boring to sit around in a pandemic on your own in a flat and not do anything. So I might as well go to work. I've done as much DIY as I can do in a 2-bedroom flat. And then, yeah, consultants start about 75 grand and go up. You know, if you become a consultant, you know, heart surgeon and do private practice, you know, there'll be people earning £300,000 a year, but that's not going to be me. That's about it. I mean, I think, so to be really clear, you might hear people, there's maybe a tendency sometimes for people in medicine to slag medicine off because they don't like it. I think, you know, a pro of medicine for me is that I get paid to go to work to do something that I absolutely love doing every single day. And I think, you know, you're really lucky if you can, it stops it being a job. Like, you know, I went for fun, essentially, to work for 2 nights this weekend. You know, if you can find something in life, whether it's medicine or anything else, that you get paid to do and paid well to do, you really enjoy, you're super lucky. Cons are the hours, the exams. If you think the exams are over when you finish medical school, then no. You'll have at least another 3 sets of exams to get to a consultant. You'll probably have loads more exams because you want to do extra stuff. You'll be picking up postgraduate teaching qualifications. I've done like a diploma in conflict and catastrophe medicine. I'm probably going to pick up an MSc in trauma. Amber's done stuff as well. I know, you know, it is lifelong learning. It's, you know, medicine is probably the best definition of lifelong learning that you can get. And that's it, I think. Yeah, come and do medicine. It's great. We need more people. We need people who are passionate, and we need people that come from different backgrounds. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to say.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Steve. I have written down loads of like different questions, which maybe might not be the best right now to ask. What I will do is, hopefully I haven't frozen. What I will do is I will hand over to Amber just to talk about her experience. And but everyone else, do put the questions in the Q&A function. I've got loads of questions that I have written down, but also keen to hear what questions that you might have for Steve and Amber to answer at the end. Over to you, Amber.
Okie dokie. Hopefully you can all see that. Great. Okay, so my name's Amber and I'm another doctor, and I'm going to be talking to you about what I do, which is emergency medicine. So the old name for emergency medicine is A&E, and so they're kind of synonymous. So if I flit in between one or the other, they are the same thing. So I'll tell you kind of how I got to where I am today. Which is, I grew up in York, which is a nice little town in the north. And like Steve, actually, I had a gap year after my A-levels. So I did standard GCSE, standard A-levels, and then knew I wanted to do medicine from quite an early age, actually, from about kind of 10 or 12. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And kind of the more I looked into it throughout school and stuff like that, I did decide that is what I wanted to do. I didn't get very much help from school. I went to like just a standard comprehensive that really didn't know very much about getting into medicine. So school wasn't that helpful. So actually I ended up attending lots of things like this and like speaking to people and trying to organize my own work experience and things like that, which was quite difficult at times. So I didn't manage to do much before I turned 18, really. So I did some volunteering stuff. I did lots of first aid and lots of St. John's and things like that. And then when I turned 18, I became a healthcare assistant at the hospital. So those are like, the old name for them is like auxiliary nursing. So you kind of help the nurses do washing and feeding and walking patients and changing beds and cleaning and things like that. And it was a bit of a shock for me at 18 in terms of I hadn't ever been in a hospital. I'd broken an arm as a child and that was it. I'd never been a patient. I was really lucky none of my family members had ever been ill. So I hadn't even visited anyone in hospital. So that was a really good job. And actually at 18, it paid way better than shop work did. So I ended up doing that for actually the whole time at medical school as well, because you could do evenings and weekends and all through the summer holidays and stuff like that. I was just on like a bank, so you just took their empty shifts. So that funded me to go traveling for about 6 months in my gap year. And I went away for fun and just some holidays, but I also went to work in Uganda on a vaccination project. So it was kind of going with real qualified GPs, doctors, nurses, going out to really rural villages in Uganda where they don't have electricity, they don't have running water, and they would run like a clinic for all the kids and weigh them and talk about malnutrition and do a lot of kind of educational stuff, and then also basically vaccinate anyone that wanted to come and get vaccinated for polio, measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, that kind of thing. And that was a brilliant thing, because you kind of felt like you were helping a bit, but also it was a really sustainable change in terms of education, and you were going with real people who were qualified, so you weren't doing anything that you shouldn't be doing or you weren't really capable of doing. So that was great, and kind of probably started me on my path to doing a lot more out of hospital medicine, which as we go through, I do a lot of expedition stuff. I'm doing a master's in global and remote healthcare. So actually those early foundations have kind of helped me along the way, really. I went to Birmingham Medical School and I did standard 5-year medicine after school. I really enjoyed being at Birmingham. It's a nice big medical school with lots of different kind of hospitals, and I really liked the campus and the curriculum, and I'm not particularly sciencey, and so I didn't want a course where I had to do a year of lab work, so Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, you all have to do a compulsory year of lab work, and I knew that wasn't for me. And after medical school, I moved back to Yorkshire to do my foundation training, and I'll go through that in a second. And currently I'm an ST4, so I'm a registrar in emergency medicine up in Leeds. So I think normal days at the moment are a bit different to what normal days pre-pandemic were, but they're kind of a bit the same. And I think lots of people think that watching, doing emergency medicine is going to be a bit like Grey's Anatomy and Casualty, and there'll be George Clooney around every corner looking great. And Steve definitely does not look like George Clooney. And in some respects, some of the stuff that you see is fairly good, and most of the blood, guts and gore is fairly accurate. But what it fails to get a lot of the time is that these are completely rare days, the days where I can hand on heart say that I saved that person's life. They're really rare, actually. And what's far more accurate is, like, if you've ever watched Green Wing, or in fact, Scrubs is a bit more accurate in terms of how much kind of messing about and banter and paperwork there is to do is far more accurate. And so, yeah, I do save people's lives occasionally, but mainly when you do, it's part of a team, there's other people there, and it's never as time critical as the TV programs make it out, where if you don't do a brain biopsy this second, the patient's going to die or anything like that. So the days are very different, and one of the reasons I absolutely love emergency medicine is its completely variable and you don't know what you're going to get in. But as Steve alluded to, there's a lot of things that are difficult about a career in medicine. And A&E especially has a lot of out of hours work. So only 1 in 3 of my shifts is a normal day, so an 8 till 5 day. The others are nights and mid shifts and late shifts, and a lot of weekends. So 1 in 3 weekends I work, and that's fine. And it depends what you like and what you're into and things like that. If you want to play Sunday league football, A&E is not the career for you, because 1 in 3 of your Sundays you will be working. So you just kind of have to know that before you go in. And obviously, if you choose a job like GP, very few GPs work weekends, and the ones that do it normally pretty voluntarily. So different specialties have different percentages of out of hours. The advantage is that today is Monday and I aren't at work today because I'm going to work the weekend instead. So I get days off during the week, which is quite nice. Other problems are that A&E itself is pretty busy, and a lot of the problems in the hospital filter down and affect us at the front door. So one of our biggest problems is something called exit block. So the hospital is full, it has no beds. So that means the new patients that arrive into A&E, they can't go anywhere. So instead of being in A&E for 4 hours, which is what they're supposed to be, they're here for 12. And that causes a whole host of problems. And it's really frustrating because you can do the best job at the beginning, but if the rest isn't following through, it's kind of a bit pointless. There are lots of patients who either make your heart sink because you're not that happy to see them, or they've genuinely got some horribly sad sort of story. And so that's quite hard work. You see the absolute best in people, but you see the absolute worst as well. So, you know, about a quarter of the patients we see are mental health, overdoses, drug addicts, alcoholics, all that kind of stuff. It's a high proportion of workload. And some of them have got some horrible, horrible stories. And I find that really quite hard work at times. But you get some great stuff as well, you know, and how people rally around in communities and, you know, things like that. So that's definitely a hard part of the day. There's lots of patients that really shouldn't be there. You know, they come to A&E because they need to go and see a dentist. You know, it's hard work, and it's hard to not get angry when the department is really busy and you're seeing people who have got like a year's history of back pain. You know, they don't need to be in an accident and emergency department. Had 12 years of abdominal pain, was one of my patients over my night shift. You know, what are we supposed to do with that? It's really hard work. And as Steve kind of alluded to, the biggest problem with medicine is that you have a lot of work to do in your own time at home. So all of our exams, you are allowed to take the day off. As the day of your exam, you're allowed a study leave. All the revision that you need to do for your compulsory exams, you do in your own time. So we work 50 hours a week. That's 50 hours if you don't stay late, and that doesn't include your commute, because some of the hospitals that you get placed at are about an hour away. So sometimes your actual just normal job is about 60 hours a week, and then you're supposed to revise, do audits and quality improvement projects and research all on top of that, as well as being a nice, well-rounded, healthy human being that also goes to the gym and, you know, volunteers at Nanas or whatever. So I think it's quite hard sometimes to juggle all the balls in the air. And so I'm pretty sure every doctor will tell you that they need to be super organized, and you have to kind of be well on it with the deadlines. And then obviously at the moment, COVID is a significant problem that is meaning lots of bad things are happening all over the world, really. So those are the bad things. But what are the good things? So this is what we look like. So this is definitely a bad thing, is having to spend 8 hours wearing this where you're dripping with sweat and you come away with pressure marks on your face. And as Steve said, you can't eat or drink in it. So you end up getting really dehydrated and coming home with a banging headache. But it's also quite fun. And we get to have a lot of fun in A&E. So one of the things I love about it the most is that we see from the day you're born to the day you die and everybody in between. So I really enjoy pediatrics, so that's children. So I think the work we do with kids is great. And I like the range of illnesses and injury that we see. So we can see heart attacks and strokes, pneumonia, skin infections, broken bones, cuts, bangs on the head, gunshot wounds, stabbings, drug overdoses, like you name it, we see it. And that's brilliant because every day is completely different. You don't know what's going to come in the door. You get to we basically have all the cards in a box, and you see them in time order unless they're really sick, and then you see them out of time. But basically you pick up the next card and you're like, oh, I don't know, I've never seen this before, how am I going to deal with this? And then you have to go and work it out. And that's brilliant if you like that. A lot of people do not like that aspect of medicine, and so they don't go into A&E because they like to know what's happening. They don't like the uncertainty. And so there are plenty of other medical specialties. So if you become a cardiologist, you're going to be a heart doctor, you're only going to see hearts, and most of what you see is going to be funny heart rhythms or heart attacks. And so like 90% of their workload is that. So there's less uncertainty, and so they can become really good experts in those small things. Whereas A&E, we're kind of jack of all trades, master of none, really. I mean, we're masters of emergencies, so we're good at that. We're good at people that are bleeding to death. We're good at people having giant heart attacks. That's what we're good at. We're not good at fiddling with people's drugs and looking at a rash that's been there for 3 months. Like we don't care about any of that, really. It's really social and it's really team focused, and that's another thing that I love about it. I would absolutely hate to be a GP because most of them sit in a room by themselves all day, especially during COVID. They're not even seeing patients, they're doing video calls, so they don't even see a human being all day. That is not for me. I work with an amazing team of other doctors, nurses, physios, pharmacists, who we can really have a team effort to deal with a patient to the best that we can. I love the fact that my job means I have to keep learning. I'm a real nerd. I absolutely love learning stuff, and medicine means you constantly have to stay up to date. But that is a challenge, and it means that you can slack off for a week, you can slack off for a few weeks, but at the end of the day, you've got to kind of keep on top of stuff over the year. And then, one of the best things about my job is there are days where you're like, I saved that person, like nobody else helped. I did that. And that's pretty awesome. And not many people in the world can say that. So this is what standard training looks like. You go to medical school for 5 or 6 years. You do 2 years of foundation training, which in most regions is 6 different 4-month jobs. So you have to do like a variety of specialties in your foundation training. And then there's a really nice natural gap where you can have a year off. So just like Steve did his sailing, I had a year off after F2. And I did some expedition jobs. So I went and helped at a marine biology site. So they had a load of marine biologists collecting data, and I went to be their doctor / I just dived every day and did very little medicine. And I went to the rainforest and covered a load of biologists who were doing research out in the Honduran rainforest. So that was awesome. I just locumed a bit. So locuming means that you just take empty shifts that nobody else can fill. The advantage is you get paid loads for them, but you get no assurance that there is going to be jobs. You get no sick leave, no holiday pay, nothing. So if you don't work, you don't get paid. So you can earn a lot of money, or you can just go off and have a great time, or do a balance of the two, which is what most people tend to do. And then I started my emergency medicine training, which is 6 years. I'm in year 4 now, but actually I've been doing it for 6 years because I've also had 2 more years off, where I've just been the doctor in Antarctica for 18 months or so. So there's a real scope to do whatever you want with medicine. That's one of the things that is so good about it, is everyone in the world needs a doctor. So you can go away and work in a developing country, in a refugee camp, in a, you know, in an inner city GP practice in London, if that's what you want, all the way up to you can work in the state of the art private practice, some kind of fancy center, and do cutting edge high tech stuff and everything in between. So the pay is okay. You know, you'll never be poor. You'll never be really rich unless you want to go into mega private practice. I think we earn an okay wage for what we do. It's not, I could earn way more being a lawyer, an architect, like my friends that went into business, I could earn way more. But I think for what we do, and the NHS gives us pretty good terms and conditions, it's pretty hard to get fired. We have a good pension, we have good sick leave, good annual leave, those kind of things, it's okay. And as I said, you've got a guaranteed job no matter where you want to work. So lots of optional extra, lots of options to have time out of training, and then options to do subspecialty training. So within emergency medicine, the two recognized subspecialties are pediatric emergency medicine and pre-hospital emergency medicine. But it is possible now to do an elderly focus. So we're trying to get a lot more elderly people out of A&E. So that's now thinking almost probably going to be a subspecialty within its own right. And it's really easy to have what's called a portfolio career when you do emergency medicine. So my supervisor is the England Rugby Union doctor. That's his main job. And actually he doesn't do that much emergency medicine anymore. One of my other consultants flies with an air ambulance. One of the others is a global health leader. So he has a partnership with the Pakistan Emergency Medicine Society, and kind of tries to create links with developing countries to improve their doctors' access to training. You can teach medical students, you know, basically you can do whatever you want with emergency medicine. So peds, event work, I talked a bit about some of the stuff you can do, but events is another nice thing you can do. This is me in Honduras at work. We talked about pre-hospital care, so that's Steve's plan to do that, and that's also my plan. You can't do pre-hospital care until you're at least an ST5 in emergency medicine, so hopefully my application will be successful next year. So that's the end goal, is to be able to do the helicopters. And then this is what I have been doing, is I was the doctor for this ship for the 18 months or so in Antarctica, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, that's probably it from me, and feel free to fire away at the questions.
Thank you so much, Amber. Yes, we do have lots and lots of questions that have come in just as you were finishing up there. So I will get to it. So one of the questions that we have is just around advice for someone who's not very academic at the moment in year 12 and actually wants to go into medicine. Do you have any advice for that person? And that's Steve, Amber, whichever one of you want to jump in.
I would say that it depends what you mean by not very academic. So the problem with medical school is it's a lot of exams and a lot of memory. So I think that memory is far more important for medical school than your intelligence, and your exam technique is pretty important. If you get mega stressed about exams, you're one of these people that is sick for weeks before an exam, then medicine is probably not the career for you. Because I've had to take an exam, apart from my years off, every year since I've been 16 I've had exams, so I have approximately one a year in my career as well. So I think that it depends what you mean by academic, and if you're well organized, you revise early, you have a good exam technique, then there's no need to be, you know, Stephen Hawkins at all. And I am not at all kind of academic I don't like biomedical sciences, I don't like pharmacology, I don't like any of that like nitty-gritty science. I like people's arms and legs falling off, really, which, you know, so it depends what you mean, but unfortunately there is no way around all the exams that we have to do. And I think if you are mega stressed by them, then it might not be the career for you. But it also might be practicing techniques and getting your kind of organizational skills down that will help you along the way.
Steve, anything to add?
No, just, I mean, to echo, some people, some of it is about, in a sense, maturity. And I don't mean that as in how much of an adult you are. I mean, the way your brain matures. Some people just do better a little bit later in life. So, you know, as an example, I got a B and 2 C's, but then went and got a first class master's degree. You know, just because it's not now doesn't mean you might not be able to do it in the future. So just whenever you're thinking of what you're going to do in your future, if you think, you know, unfortunately the medical schools have to set a limit somewhere, and everyone wants to do medicine, so they're going to, like Amber said, you don't need to be a genius to do medicine. You know, I think you could take probably a fairly sensible, intelligent 18-year-old with no medical school experience and give them 3 months on a ward, and they'd probably be 80 or 90% of an F1 junior doctor who spent 5 or 6 years at medical school. Because some of it is just, you see it and you do it and you learn, you know, some of it is, writing is not a doctor job. You know, anyone can write pretty much. I think unfortunately they've got to set a bar somewhere, and you have to achieve that bar. But like Amber said, you know, if you're maxed out to get to whatever their requirement is, it's, as I've learned with most things when it comes to learning, is, you know, and if you've found it with doing your GCSEs, your AS levels or A levels, then you get to university and then you do postgraduate courses, they essentially go, everything we taught you beforehand is an oversimplification. This is how it really is. And then a year later, they do the same thing. And a year later, so it steps up and it steps up and it steps up. Yeah, I had a different entry route, but yeah, you don't want to go and do something that's going to essentially terrorize you and cost you a lot of money if you don't finish it.
Just to kind of jump off that in terms of like applying for medicine, we've got a question about how do you generally prepare for like medicine uni interviews? Is there a knack to it? Is there things that people should like look out for in terms of preparing for it?
You went to med school sooner than me.
More recently. Yeah, and I sat in and helped examine for some of the ones at Warwick. So there are, broadly speaking, there are 2 different ways of interviewing. So one of them is the way that the more old school medical schools will do it. So Oxford, Cambridge, sort of, I did one at King, yeah, Guy's and Tommy's King's Medical School, which is you go into a room with 2 or more people who just grill you for 20 minutes, and they're not trying to trick you out, but it's just high throughput interviewing, and your heart rate will probably never drop below 150, and they won't. I don't think it's a good way of getting the best out of someone, because you're on the spot, and some people might say, well, you know, when you have someone go into cardiac arrest in front of you and you're the only person there, you're on the spot and you got to deal with it. But it's, you know, you're talking about the career for the rest of your life, aren't you? Maybe the odds personally are a bit different, but medical schools are increasingly moving towards assessment days or half days. So, you know, things that, for example, at Warwick, you do when I did it, you do sort of teamwork based exercise where you're in a group, and it's about, I've got to not swear, not being an idiot towards other people, making a contribution, and, you know, demonstrating things that require for teamwork, because as Amber's said, you know, the team in medicine is more important than you are, probably, for almost all things. Then there'll be something about an interview. Now, they tend to be structured interviews that take a long time and include something, you know, we watched a video about consultation that formed then part of our interview, and that pulled from our portfolio. And the guy that interviewed me actually wasn't a doctor. He was one of the lecturers who was non-medical, and he just, you know, he had a list of questions and he furiously wrote what I said, and they all got discussed as a group later on. And then there's usually something about prioritizing. So, you know, it's common for us to have to do 10 different things at the same time, or be asked to do 10 different things at the same time. And, you know, one of them is that patient over there has stopped moving and gone grey, and the little green squiggly line on their monitor has gone flat and is going completely mad, flashing lights and blinking. And a nurse is asking you to prescribe some paracetamol for someone who's got a temperature. Which one do you go and see first? I mean, I'm massively oversimplifying that, but there will be something about how you prioritize tasks. The other things, so stay up to date. So Radio 4 has got a really good series about science and medicine. Listen to, I mean, I listen to Radio, I'm 35, so you probably all think I'm really old. I hope I'm not, but yeah, I've listened to Radio 4, thanks, I've listened to Radio 4 every morning, probably since I was about 20, and it gives, you stay up to date, so you do get a bit of medicine, but you just know about the world around you. What they want is a well-rounded individual who is bright, who has got social skills, who can deal with stress and deal with other people, but is not, like I said, is not maxed out by just having to do some exams, because, you know, medicine's hard. And something I think it's probably related to one of the questions is, I think one of the things I think is really important is that you need to be happy in life to be happy at work. And, you know, if you are so, and vice versa, so if you're super stressed at work because everything's super hard or everything's really stressful for you, you won't enjoy your life. So they're trying to find people who've demonstrated that they've achieved things whilst also having a life. So they've academically achieved whilst having a well-rounded life where they play the flute and the piano and all sorts of other, don't swear, things like that.
I think, yeah, I'll chip in with that. So I think when I also did some of the interviews for medical school at Birmingham, and they really want you to be a normal human being. They don't want you to be the creme de la creme of the intellectual world, but you actually can't talk to another human being, because then you should just go and do your physics and coding course, don't do medicine. So they want to know that you're bright, they want to know that you're engaged with the world, and they'll always ask you an ethical question in most of the exams. So there'll be something, so one of mine was about the ethics of giving a liver transplant to an alcoholic, and they don't expect you to know the textbook answer of what is the UK's transplant policy. That's not what they're asking. They want to see you weigh up the pros and cons and talk about good things, and they don't want you to go, alcoholics should never be allowed healthcare, they've put themselves in this situation. They don't want you to do that. They want you to say, oh, this is a tough one because of these things on this hand and these things on this hand. So think about ethical issues, think about world issues, you know, do you know what's going on in the world? So, you know, COVID's now become a global thing, but what is the biggest infectious disease killer in the world? It's TB and HIV. And just because they don't affect the UK, you should know about it, and you should know about kind of global research as well and things like that. So do you know what's going on in the world? Do you know what's going on in politics roughly? You know, do you know where does the NHS's funding come from? Things like that. Are you a human being? Can you communicate well? Can you weigh up ethical decisions? And just like Steve said, what are your passions in life? Because we don't want you to live and breathe medicine, because you're the kind of person that's just going to burn out. What do you love doing? Do you love playing football? Do you love art? You don't need to be a grade 8 flautist to get into med school. You can be like, oh, actually, I started to play the ukulele this year and I'm really enjoying it, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Just have a hobby that you do that's going to keep you sane during med school, and then will carry you through the future. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a really great answer, guys. And just jumping off that, just keeping on the theme of like applications, because I know both of you mentioned things around work experience. And one question we have from Priya is actually where, I know Amber, you mentioned some of these, but where can people find suitable work experience?
I think this is really tough, especially in COVID. I'm really not sure with COVID going on what the answer will be, but in a non-COVID time, definitely like nursing homes are a good place, because nursing homes are always desperate for people to come and serve tea and help feed people. And you know, I'm now a fairly senior doctor. Do I feed people at work? No, not anymore, but I can, and it wouldn't disgust me to do it. So it's a good thing that shows that you have compassion and care for others, and that you don't think you're too good to do these kind of jobs. So nursing homes often just have people that go in and play chess with old people. Age UK, I think, in COVID might actually still be going on. So Age UK has like I did this while I was at medical school as well. You basically befriend an old lonely person, and I think you have to commit to an hour a week. So I used to go to this chap who lived all by himself, who had really poor mobility, so he couldn't get out. So I was the only social contact he had all week, was just an hour from me, and we used to just go and sit in his house and chit chat about nothing. You know, I didn't go to clean or do anything like that. We just chatted. And so I bet Age UK is still going strong, actually. And that's really good. Hospital work experience is tough, and my school in York had a link with York Medical School, so we got a week of work experience. But I don't know, it might be worth, is this a national thing? Is everyone, or are you Birmingham based at the moment?
We are in lots of different regions, so we're West Mids, South West, and London.
So the best thing to do is probably see what your local hospital is to you, and see if they have a partnership, or the local medical school probably has a partnership. That's how I managed to get some formal work experience. Any advice, Steve?
So you can, I worked in a hospital for 3 years before I applied. So I used to follow mates around at work when I finished my shifts. So yeah, it's different for me. But so you can, hospitals have got volunteering services, and I know ours is still running. So have a look on their website, and it's usually under something to like, look for, so volunteering. Firstly, you can possibly work as a healthcare assistant, but you need to be over 16 for that, at least, possibly over 18, which would be paid work. And then we have volunteers. So, I still see sort of 17, 18-year-olds kicking about, usually pushing a tea trolley and but you're in that, it gets you in the environment. So, work experience, it's really difficult, because what I knew about what I was getting myself in for, I think there's probably a question about this later on. I knew exactly what I was getting myself in for. I'd gone out with people who are doctors, so I knew the personal, what personal life was like. So in terms of, you're always at work, and I worked in a hospital, so I'd seen firsthand for a long time what medicine involved. I think it's really difficult to get an idea. I've had friends from when I started training who, sorry, that's me, who went through the whole of medical school, were really academic, really bright, absolutely lovely people, really amazing human beings, who started the job and was just like, no, and stopped at the end of 2 years and left medicine. So getting into the hospital is difficult, because everyone wants work experience. Medical schools, there's widening access to medical schools. A lot of the widening access to medical schools is something that's run by a lot of med schools to help people get in. Volunteering, if you can't get a paid job. And then, like Emma said, there's loads of stuff that you can do that isn't work experience in a hospital, but it doesn't matter, because so what you need is experience of caring for other people. So care homes care for other people, charities, homeless shelters care for other people, that you can go and help in. Think it doesn't have to be that massive trauma centre with 1,000 beds in it that's sat at the end of the motorway. It can be caring for, if you are a carer for a relative, you probably have more insight into caring than I do, after I've worked in hospital for 15 years and have been a doctor for 5. You just think about, if you can't get a formal work experience with some doctors kicking around a hospital, what can you get, or what is a caring role that you already fulfill or can get, which you can talk about, because you'll do way better talking about the thing that you've done for, been in a care home for 2 years as a helper, than you will do from 1 week following a highly specialized consultant around doing some operation you're never going to do, and you didn't even know which bits of the body he was hacking out when you watched it, and you fainted into the sterile field whilst watching it as well, which has happened.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. And I will definitely make sure, I've made a list of all the things that you've just mentioned there. So we'll definitely pass them on in an email as well. And I know that Steve and Amber, if there's any kind of other ways that people can get work experience, please do pass them on to us, and we'll pass them on to the pupils. Just because I'm quite conscious of time, final question, and in one sentence, to see if you can summarize it. what has been the absolute highlight of all of the years that you have been working in medicine?
Not what, there's got to be within medicine. I got, as I like pre-hospital, I went to do medical cover for the Isle of Man TT with some of the best known medical people in the country for that sort of thing, and got to go to a properly big job where essentially someone hit on a motorbike doing 150 miles an hour, hit a tree, which obviously didn't end well for him. But from me learning and getting to do stuff and seeing that pre-hospital environment like maxed out was a fantastic experience.
Amazing. Amber?
I mean, I've just spent 18 months in Antarctica being a doctor with a load of penguins. I can't really top that yet. So maybe in the future.
I'm definitely going to have to ask about Antarctica and penguins because I love penguins. Thank you so much, Amber and Steve, for joining us today and giving us all of those tidbits and telling us everything. It's been really, really helpful. Thank you so, so much. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended as well. It's been great to have you here. We've also got a recording, so we'll make sure that we will pass it on to you as well. Steve, Amber, any kind of last tidbits you wanted to say?
Firstly, Mia sent you a message. Secondly, no, just good luck. You know, it's difficult to get into. It's competitive, but as someone who you know, has tried to get into medicals, well, didn't try the first time around, but then did it later on. If you want to do it and you don't manage to get in for whatever reason, don't be disheartened. Carry on, go and do something else. Work hard, get a good degree classification. So aim for a first. Do wholesome, charitable, looking after people things in your spare time during your undergrad degree and enjoy it. And then you can always reapply later.
It's a wonderful job. I know we've told you a load of the bad things, but it is a great job, not to be taken lightly. Although at your stage, go for it now and see what happens. You'll make your mind. It's better to decide you want to do it now and change your mind at medical school. You can, as Steve said, if you do a 5-year medical degree and then you're like, actually, this isn't for me, you'll still have an amazing degree that can get you into a load of other careers. So it's never a wasted career path at all, and opens doors to research, education, all those other kind of things. But it is hard work, but it's hard work because it's also awesome.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and we'll be in touch with the next edition of this series. Thanks, guys. Take care.